I'd like to call to order the regular meeting of the Perry Municipal Authority, March 2nd, 2020, at 6:15. Roll call, please.
Kildare.
Here.
Bond.
Here.
Dilbeck. Here. Ahern.
Here.
Marshall. Here. White.
Here.
Morrell. Wines. Stroller.
Here. Thank you. I do declare a quorum. Invocation to, this evening will be by Peter Olson with the Zion Lutheran Church. Thank you, sir.
Thank you for having me here tonight. Let us pray. Holy Father, we give you thanks today for the many blessings that you provide us. We thank you for the breath that you give us, for the calling to leadership that you provide, and the urge to fulfill that calling. Help us tonight to be good stewards of the gifts that you have entrusted each of us with, whether it be in our personal lives or as representatives of the community. We pray that you bring guidance and wisdom as discussions that are had and as work for the betterment of the people within Perry is gone through. Help each person leave this place with a sense of confidence in decisions that have been made. And tonight, we especially lift up the many people within our community who are vulnerable to health and poverty crises. As fear looms over the potential fallout of coronavirus in the country and the world, help those who are particularly at risk know that they are cared for. We look for you for inspiration for our scientists, doctors, and leaders within that. Help us to be advocates for the many who might be affected, and help us offer encouragement to those within our community who care for our health, especially our doctors, our nurses, our emergency response folks. We give you thanks for all of them. Continue to remind your people of your presence. In your holy name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Item number 1 is the consent agenda. I have one item.
Motion approved. Second.
Roll call, please.
Kildare.
Yes.
Bond.
Yes.
Dilbeck.
Yes.
Ahern.
Yes.
Marshall. Yes. White.
Yes.
Stroller.
Yes. Comments from those assembled pertaining to the items on the PMA agenda? Seeing none, move to item 5, proclamation, accommodations, reports, and inquiries by the governing body. Item 6, any new business? Item 7,
Motion adjourned.
Second.
roll call, please.
Kildare.
Yes.
Bond.
Yes.
Yes.
Ahern.
Yes.
Marshall. Yes. White.
Yes.
Stroller.
Yes. I'd like to call to order the regular meeting of the City Council of the City of Perry, March 2nd, 2020 at 6:18. Roll call, please.
Kildare.
Here.
Bond.
Here.
Dilbeck. Here. Ahern.
Here.
Marshall. Here. White.
Here.
Morrell. Wines. Stroller.
Here. I do declare a quorum. Item 1 is the consent agenda. There's 3 items.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Kildare.
Yes.
Bond.
Yes.
Dilbeck.
Yes.
Ahern.
Yes.
Marshall. Yes. White.
Yes.
Stroller.
Yes, thank you. Item 4, the comments from those assembled pertaining to the items on the city agenda. Item number 5, proclamation, accommodations, reports, and inquiries by the governing body. Russell, can I call on you just for a second, please?
Yes,
Would you mind sharing with the council, what you told me about how your fire department felt about the council coming to your house and your fire department the other day and looking around?
yeah.
You kinda shared something with me about,
Yeah, I just, on behalf of everyone up there, I just wanted to express their appreciation for everyone coming in. It meant a lot to that group up there to know that, I don't know that it's ever happened since I've been there, where the council come and toured the station and looked at the facilities and talked to the folks there, so.
And I want to second that. I really appreciate you guys taking the time coming up and touring our facility.
thank you.
Yeah, it meant a lot.
Russell just said something to me on the street one day about that, and I thought the council needs to know about that, so. Okay, item 6, city manager's remarks.
Make this real short, sweet. If you have not driven Fur and seen the progress of our sidewalk project, I suggest you do that, with the exception of 2 spots, which is right in front of the drive-to at Ditch Witch. they're almost connected from 8th Street all the way to Brum. And it's really looking good. So we appreciate everybody that, the council certainly for voting for that, for ODOT for helping fund that, and the city also funded that, and also for the contractors. They were here over the weekend and saw them, I believe they were here both days, really doing what they can to get us close to completion, so. Any questions or anything? Thank you much.
All right, we'll move on to item 7. Continue discussion of the hiring of MKEC Engineering to prepare a master drainage study for the city of Perry. Also discuss a drainage study for 2nd Street and Tower and direct appropriation of monies for such studies. Our last council meeting, this was on there, and we had questions about how this was all gonna come about and what the studies meant, and because it was kind of vague, you know. So Larry talked to Stephen Frank, NKC. I called him also, and he said he would come this evening and kind of share with us the intentions of the reports. I'm glad you're here, sir.
Yeah, glad to be here. Glad I can see.
He said he had eye surgery, so.
So I had some LASIK done on Friday, so I wished I would have done it sooner. It's been great so far.
I think previous times you've had glasses on.
Yep, that's right.
You found your way to Perry, so.
I did. We'll see. I'm a little bit worried going back with the glare of lights. That's probably been my only issue so far, but I think I'll be okay. So, all right. Well, I guess I'll start with the drainage-wide or the city-wide drainage study. Kind of give you the background of that. So that all stemmed from back in May 2019 when we were having constant rain. And so I was asked to come down and look at 4 different properties that were experiencing drainage problems. And during my visit, I was asked, you know, what would you think about a citywide drainage study? So I took that back to our office and we sat down and thought about it in terms of what could we do from a citywide perspective. And I guess I might back up, and when you say drainage study, typically it's going to consist of hydrology and hydraulics. So hydrology, we're looking at the drainage basins and how much water is generated in a certain rain event. And then hydraulics is actually routing it through the basin. So routing it through the streets, routing it through the storm sewer or the drainage swales that you might have. So the problem with hydraulics is it typically needs a lot of details. I mean, we need to know the shape of the gutter. We need to know the size of the pipes and the elevations and the slope of the land. Hydrology, you know, we can use like LiDAR, light ranging, to get some rough elevations, and we can typically break basins out by using that, so you don't have to survey your whole city. And so if we were wanting something that was going to touch the whole city, that was what came to mind, was, well, we could break out these basins and we could break out the key drainage paths. Probably the only downfall of that is it is not going, that in itself is not going to resolve the drainage issues. All it is going to give you a kind of decision-making tool and maybe help your engineers when they start in on these more detailed reports like the Maple and Second. You know, jumping to that one, we have to look at that basin, but we have to look at everything that's coming at it. So anything upstream, we have to look at that too to determine how much water is coming to that location. So none of it would be wasted effort. You would have these basins already delineated, but the downfall is it doesn't, that in itself does not resolve any of the drainage issues that you're having. So the purpose of that report was just to kind of lay out something where we could touch, you know, every part of the city potentially. And it was just mainly to have a discussion like this at the end of that letter. You know, I said if it was something that the city wanted, we'd put together a more formal proposal. We just threw out that 10 to 20,000 was probably what it would take to delineate all those basins for your city. And that could be done, you know, if it was something we still wanted to do, we could do it in a phased approach, maybe moving ward to ward, you know, but that's kind of the background of the citywide drainage study.
And the study would give us exactly what, in more specificity.
It is high level, so you would basically have a map and it would show the drainage basins. You know, some of them might be a couple acres, some of them might be 15 acres, and it would delineate the drainage paths. But that in itself, you know, would not, I mean, it would not give you an answer to why on, you know, Maple and Second is the water, you know, coming at that house. It would just kind of be it's a step in the process, so to speak. So,
Oh, go ahead, no, go ahead.
no, and so that's where, I mean, if the goal really is to try to run down these complaints that are coming in, your money is probably better spent focusing on those basins where you're getting the most complaints and calls, or the city staff knows that there's an issue. I think your money would be better spent there than looking at citywide.
Basically, I'm sorry, did you want to go first?
No, go ahead.
The citywide would just give us possible recommendations for us to go determine if there needs to be work there,
Right.
right?
And it would help too, so say you would get, if you had this map with those drainage basins and you would get a call or an email or something where a complaint was, it would help you go up there and look, and you could look at the map, or you could have your engineer tell you and be like, well, yeah, they're at the bottom of the, you know, the drainage basins, there's 20 acres that eventually runs by their house, or they might be at the very top. And not that they might still both be having an issue, but one of them's probably seeing way more water than the other. So it would help you in that sense, you know.
There's also an estimate of $7,000 for the drainage issues on what we call our East Maple Edition out there on
Right.
Second Tower and Maple. Now, is that for you to actually come in and do a study in that area? Is that what?
Yes, and that one, unlike the citywide, this one would be down in the weeds, so we would do the hydrology and hydraulics, and I did purposely leave out, so that $7,000, that was analysis and make recommendations, but I knew going into it, you will need some level of survey in order to do that properly. I did not want to put a number in there until, you know, maybe we had an opportunity to look at it, start, and then determine how much survey we needed. Because I think a lot of these, it's best to take like an iterative process through it, or approach to it, to where that way we don't go out and get more survey than we need, or if we send our surveyors out way ahead of time, they may not get enough.
Yeah.
So that's where that thought process is, that we would start it, kind of narrow down the information and the scale of survey that we needed. There'd be a bit of a pause while we went and got survey, and then when we got it back, then we could continue moving forward with the hydraulics portion, so we could make recommendations.
Okay. So,
Isn't the problem doing the individual projects that, I mean, you may solve that, but you're gonna hasten water down the way. You've gotta handle the water that, once you've got it past that problem, then you come up on the next problem until you actually get it to the tributary or creek that's gonna carry it away. I mean,
Correct. Yeah, and I think that's what makes all of this extremely hard, is compared to a virgin site and open field, this is much harder, because right now, if we go making any changes, then we gotta own it. We gotta make sure that we're not gonna push the problem somewhere else. The benefit of Second and Maple, that addition, is the outfall isn't
Takes
a
it
lot,
to the creek.
isn't a long ways away, but there is a problem at that outfall, at that
Yeah.
intersection of Tower and Maple, I believe it is, that needs some help. But you're right, some of these other ones, if it's nestled in the middle of town, the basin where the problem is, you're right, we have to look a long ways back in the drainage basins and move it forward, just to make sure, okay, we moved it more efficiently through this basin, but now are we dumping it somewhere else where they can't handle it?
and we've gotta look at the natural flow of water,
Mm-hmm.
because we can't change direction of the natural flow unless we're gonna build get the necessary easements and build the necessary public construction project to in fact get it to that final place.
Correct.
I guess that's why, my interest would be more in that in that master drainage study, or, we did it with the sewer study. And, we followed what that, what that was. I just want to make sure that we don't move water that isn't following its natural course, and that by doing one project, we don't end up with a problem somewhere else. Now, if this particular problem can be solved, and if in fact it's a public problem, because, and if it is, I'm not unfamiliar with the problem, although I've heard the young lady speak to us about the fact that it flows into her house. And that, of course, is, is traumatic. In one of my towns, they raised the level of the alley. And the water, when it came off the roofs, it flew right into the bar, which of course is a real problem if you're sitting there drinking a beer and the water's coming in. And so the city built almost like a speed bump down the whole side of the alley, and now it runs on out to the street rather than, unless it really rains, and it'll climb that hump and probably get into the bar. But do you know if that particular problem that this lady has is something that we contributed to? I mean, do you know that by looking at it?
Just from visual observation, when I came down in May and looked at all 4 of those locations, I would say no. I don't see anything that the city has done in terms of modifications to the street or drainage way that is now sending more water that way. All these residences, have been established. It's not like they were new construction, so they've been there for some years. I think the biggest part is that it was raining a lot last year, and so people tend to forget when you go through the drought, and then you get all this constant weather and rain, and was definitely contributing to it. So.
And then I suppose your study would show the floodplains, right?
Right, if there are any in that area.
Yeah, or anywhere
Right.
throughout the community,
Correct.
which we do have identified on a floodplain map currently.
Right,
Do we not, David?
yes, we do.
So what do you think? You're our planner.
Well, I have a question for Steve. What design criteria would you design to? Is it 25-year, 50-year, 100-year? You can't design for 500.
That's
but
right.
What's your
We
criteria?
typically stay in the 5 to 10 year range if we're putting in storm sewer through residential neighborhoods. But then, if we're designing a new neighborhood from scratch, then we are making sure we provide escape routes. So once that 5 to 10 year event is exceeded, the water has escape route elsewhere other than the buildings. And I'd say, for all of those drainage issues that I looked at, the finished floor of the buildings were too low. I mean, they're lower than the street in a lot of areas, and it's just not ideal. It's hard to make it work, because to make it drain, you have to cut everything. There's no raising.
Is it going to expound upon and kind of ask a question on what Bryce was alluding to, just so I can understand better? The overall versus the focused drainage issues, and kind of what you said too. So if we had the overall, that only, and just tell me where I'm wrong and need more information, but what I'm hearing is it basically only gives us possibly what to go look at. But if we do call you to do a project where you have to do the survey and the hydraulics, then you would continue to extend that each way as far as you had to for that project. Is that correct?
Correct. But if you already had the overall drainage study done, the boundaries, the drainage basins, wherever that problem was, they would already be delineated. So we get a little bit of a jump start.
Okay.
I think my biggest fear when you say an overall drainage study of your city is just the amount of cost involved. Because once we got all these drainage basins delineated, and then we start to move in to more of the modeling of the of the hydraulics, a lot like they do to make floodplain maps, is just the amount of level of detail that you're gonna need to get, you know, picking up storm sewer structures, or you're routing stuff through neighborhoods where everybody has their own driveway culvert. I mean, it just, I'd be worried that it might get out of hand, unless it was very, very defined. I mean, that, my thought is if you were going to approach it as a whole study, is you do these drainage basins and then you'd find your primary outfalls, your primary drainage ways through town, and you'd focus on those. So you'd start at your outfall end and work your way back. And hopefully the city could give some input of, yeah, that side of town or that outfall is a problem, and we could work into it and see if there are bottlenecks somewhere.
Steve, would it be unreasonable to say that on a rainy day, we could pretty well identify the areas to focus on? And we know some of these problem areas already. I'm just suggesting it might be money better spent to go ahead and do a detailed study or a detailed plan on the areas where we know there's a problem. And that's as much as a question as a statement.
That was my next question, just along the same lines, is if we already, which we do, I believe we have several locations identified, would you recommend doing the detailed plan versus the overall plan if we, you know?
Yeah. I think it would give you answers to the questions or recommendations. But to Bryce's point, some of these, if they're in the middle of town, we're gonna have to chase them a long way, and then we'll just, you know, I mean, we can handle that in terms of when we're putting together proposals and fees, so everybody knows this is the scope of the project and this is how far we think we're gonna have to take it.
How much have you talked to Sam about some of these drainage issues? Didn't we have a document in the file that had like a list of 5 or 6 drainage?
Yes.
We did, didn't we? Huh? Did Sam put that together? Have you seen that list?
I don't think so. I have a list of the locations of where I went in May, but I haven't
Would that have
seen
been
it
the same
updated.
list?
I have no idea.
I don't think so. I think it was a little bit more expanded.
You know, I think it might be smart for you to at least, I mean, maybe, and the council can do what they want, but if those are, just following what you're saying, Derek.
I'm not making any suggestions, I was just asking questions.
Right, but following the line of discussion, if we took a look at those, there were about 5, 6, 7 of them that had been identified. And of course, those probably relate to, you know, in different quadrants, each one of those, you know, maybe all the basins or something. It might be better to come in with a little bit more facts, and then perhaps maybe we could, you know, narrow the scope of, or, you know, even broaden the scope of what we're talking about. Here are 7 big ones, and this is what it might take to look to, you know, to come up with plans to address them. I'd also think that if we had plans to address them, that would make getting grants or something more easier.
Would it make sense to, you know, we're talking about the 6 or 7 locations around town, and if we go in and do work in that area, you're talking about having to chase it out a long ways. I think in my mind, it would be beneficial to have that original study. You can see your maps and you know, okay, I'm working in this area, and rather you chase it out, we already know that if you go 3 blocks over, you're gonna be into another basin. And we need to, so I guess what I'm saying is, we could end up spending more money on chasing things than we would if we had the overall view of the.
Yeah, I think the only alternate point may be that if you're focusing on these 7 areas, you're only gonna be dealing with the basins that are impacted by that. So there may be some outside of that would get delineated in this master plan that may not ever have a problem. So to some degree there's a waste, and it's something that we could always circle back to. Maybe it's, look at these 7, and by the time we chase them one way or the other, there's really, I mean, maybe it takes a quarter of the basins, they're already done, you know, and then we could elaborate off of that.
So I'm wondering if we don't do something like those seven points, have him, I don't wanna waste any of your time either, but have him look at it with Sam, and then maybe give us a recommendation. We're gonna have to go this far back and, you know, with this one, or, no, maybe we are kinda near the end, like the tower addition, we kinda are at the end of that, basin, right? I mean, in the outfall. So, in that case, there may not be much direction, you know, either way outside of that one.
Correct.
Well,
So,
that location there, I know you said you didn't think there was any liability on the city's part, anything we did different.
Yeah.
But for 4 or 5 city managers back, we've admitted fault. We've been going over and digging ditches and sandbagging the lady's house, and so now she's coming to the council, and like I told you, the council in the recent past, she hasn't quit coming, she's just coming to me. And so I'm trying to take all the heat to keep her out of here, you know, and that's fine. But we either have to tell her something or do something, because I'm not just gonna continue to take it and not know what to tell the lady, you know. So I've told her that we're starting some studies and we're gonna have a direction soon, you know, so, last time she came, Larry said that I'll get with you tomorrow, and he sent her Stephen's report. Well, that doesn't help her any, you know. She wants some action, and I understand, she's got water coming in her house, I get it. So I feel like we need to do something, because we've admitted fault, whether it was our fault or not. So.
When Keith Ayotte, I think, I don't have maybe it was in September, he came down and met with a contractor that she was,
Yeah.
maybe had already hired or was thinking about hiring about a fix, and, you know, that we strongly discouraged it because essentially it may free the water from her house, but it was gonna push it downstream. But as Keith walked through that drainage easement corridor in the alleys there, you know, several other houses, you know, they didn't have grass growing, probably because it was wet most of the time, and then with the things that are happening down at the outfall, you know, I think there's enough issues with that basin as a whole that, you know, even if it wasn't just one resident, you know, having a complaint, it's probably worth looking into.
Yeah. Well, she did contact me and said that she's gonna start some dirt work over there, and I'll let her know that if you do that, it's not under our advice, and if you divert water somewhere else, that she was liable. It wasn't gonna be the city being liable. So I haven't been over to see if she did anything. But, I would hope the council at least, we could start over there at least to do something. I know there's several other places, Coffee Drive, I've been getting some phone calls about.
I'm thinking if he can go to the other 6 spots or whatever, and then come back with a recommendation saying, yeah, 3 of these, we're gonna have a big area, or no, you know, then maybe we go do the LiDAR versus just focused areas. But if they're all at the end of the outfalls or whatever, then it might make more sense to just focus in on those areas and do them.
I do want for the record to state that probably we didn't admit it was our problem. We probably affected subsequent remedial measures after the fact. That's what we were doing, subsequent remedial measures, and not admitting that it was our fault.
It's all due to interpretation.
Yeah, I know, but I just want to.
You sandbag the house.
Right. I mean, and that's a good subsequent remedial measure, but it's not an admission of fault. So.
Which we've had to do in other areas, I
Yes.
think, in
Yeah, when it
recent
happens, you've got to get out and do what you got to do.
Any more questions for Stephen?
Thank you.
I got 2 more points if
Okay.
I could.
Go ahead.
I guess the first one would be the development and implementing of a drainage complaint form. I don't know if the city has one already, but I do think after last year and having these complaints come in that something like that would be very beneficial. You know, something that has laid out questions that the resident has to fill out in terms of when was the first time did this occur. You know, where is it coming in your house? How often does it happen? And, you know, you can't require pictures or video, but that would be great, especially, you know, when we're getting called to come help. I mean, I have no idea, is it just running through your property or is it running through your garage? I mean, I have no idea, and I think it would really help. You could even put, I mean, pointers on there. I mean, we've had simple stuff where people call saying they have, you know, sump pump can't keep up, water in their basement, and you go visit their house and the downspouts are dumping right there at the house. They don't move it any further away than a foot, you know, so it's just kind of recirculating. But that drainage complaint form, I think, would help your engineer, and it would help all of you too, help prioritize which one of these are really an issue. I'd say, you know, people that, if the water's running in their house, maybe they go to the top of the list. I mean, just throwing that out as an example. So I just wanted to bring that up, that I do think it would be beneficial. And then, so if I'm gonna go look at several other spots, for now, should we hold on the 7th or the Maple and 2nd, or would you like to move forward without?
Well, I think I'd probably like for you to go see all of them. And
Okay.
kind of say, well, this is my recommendation for the, whatever it is, 5, 6, 7 places.
Okay.
I'll send that list to you tomorrow.
All right.
Is that all you got?
Yes.
Okay, any questions? Anybody? Thank you very much for
Yep,
coming
thank
in.
you.
I appreciate it.
Appreciate it.
I really appreciate it. Okay, item 8, discuss approval of a grant agreement with the Malzahn Family Affiliated Fund for the Oklahoma City Community Foundation in the amount of $209,718 for the important public capital expenditures. This is the grant with the Malzahn Family Affiliated Fund that we applied for. And it has listed out there in the background everything that has been approved. We just need to approve the grant agreement. Direct the city manager to extend the council written appreciation to the Malzahn Family Trust.
Motion to approve the grant agreement.
Second.
Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Kildare.
Yes.
Bond.
Yes.
Dilbeck.
Yes.
Ahern.
Yes.
Marshall. Yes. White.
Yes.
Stroller.
Yes, thank you, council. Item 9, there's several items now. We'll list out some of the purchase items we need to purchase through that grant. Item 9 is consider purchase of firefighting equipment. Item A is consider purchase of 23 MSA, how you say that, Russell, Carnes?
Yes.
1044 with Defender, Boats, helmets, and Casco in the state bid amount of $7,153. Russell, what, just briefly, what are this? Is that a helmet
It's
apparatus?
a helmet with additional eye protection.
Okay, thank you.
Do you want a separate?
Separate.
Yeah, we
Yes.
did
So
separate.
I'll make a motion to approve that particular item.
Second.
Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Kildare.
Yes.
Bond.
Yes.
Dilbeck.
Yes.
Ahern.
Yes.
Marshall. Yes. White.
Yes.
Stroller.
Yes. Item B, consider purchase of 23 fire rescue jackets with pants, suspenders, and hood from Chief Fire Safety Company Incorporated in the state bid amount of $65,435. Now, this is the full bunker gear that they wear. From time to time, those things wear out and probably expire, I'm guessing.
They do 10 years.
So this is a new set of bunker gear for our firefighters.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Kildare.
Yes.
Bond.
Yes.
Dilbeck.
Yes.
Ahern.
Yes.
Marshall. Yes. White.
Yes.
Stroller.
Yes, thank you. Item 10, consider purchase of a John Deere 5055E utility tractor from P&K Equipment in the amount of the state bid price of $30,401.77. This would be a new brush hog tractor for us.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Copart.
Yes.
Vaughn.
Yes.
Bobbit.
Yes.
Baker.
Yes.
Marshall. Yes. White.
Yes.
Strong.
Yes. Thank you, council. Item 11, consider approval of amendment to the Perry Personnel Manual 2020 by the amendment of Chapter 1, Section 9, subsection J pertaining to the hiring and supervising relatives. I will let Bryce handle this issue.
Our last manager felt strongly about this. I didn't feel as strongly about this, but she's the manager. And you may feel strongly about this. I quite frankly feel that sometimes sons are brought up by fathers in public service positions. It's certainly all over Boston and New York and Philadelphia. I mean, where father follows son, you know. And, you know, I think it's horrible that you can't put the two together. Now, I know that it does cause problems, you know, it can cause problems with supervision and the like, but in our form of government, the manager is the supervisor, you know, he's the ultimate decision maker. Nobody gets hired or fired or even disciplined except by the manager. And of course, we can't hire anybody related to the manager within the third degree, or to anyone related to any of you within the third degree, and that's called nepotism, and that's not permitted by state law. So we had, you know, why is this coming up? There, of course, is an issue. Somebody really well trained in something in a department that we'd really like to have that person, correct, Chief?
Yes.
And there's a relative in that department that'll kind of be at the same level. But really trained from another state and somebody we could really use, and so that's why the issue has come up. I think that the way we've written this, it would eliminate the prohibition to hiring. It would continue to allow the prohibition to exist in a direct supervisor capacity, but the manager would have the ability to, in particular cases, exempt it or manage it. So that's the item.
Any discussion?
Larry, how do you feel about it, being the manager?
I approve for it to be on there. Horizontal, I don't have a problem with it. Vertical, yes, certainly. But there are situations, especially in a small town, and sometimes this is what you need to do, because you have to do it. Especially when you have someone as qualified as this person is. That's something that we strive to do every day, with every hire, to make certain that we become more professional, that we become more inclusive in what we're trying to do, that we work more as a team in every hire that we do. And when someone comes along like this, that's qualified and hits all those benchmarks, we need to do everything we possibly can to make certain that she's in our state. But thank you for asking.
Council, what would you like to do?
That's a crazy question, 'cause I don't know. What's the first and the third degree? What's that mean? Like,
There's actually a chart. First degree is brother, or his father's son. Their second degree is uncle. Isn't that right?
Right.
And then third degree is cousin.
Yeah.
And there's, you know, to tell you the truth, I don't know. You got to take out the chart.
right.
And the chart's in the manual, and
Yeah.
you go through. And second degree includes first degree. Okay. It doesn't include, you know, third degree. And so you actually look at the chart and go, okay, in-law, cousin, is it first or second? So no, that's a good question.
Actually, it's called the chart of consanguinity.
Yeah.
That's a good name.
It is good.
Teacher.
Pardon?
Well, we have to do something, council, so we can move on.
Larry, will you give me a very, not the current example, but give me, because I'm a slow learner, a practical example of if we approve this, what that would look like? Like use a department, I'm so-and-so, does that make sense?
No.
I'm a little confused on the wording of it. I just want to make sure that I'm voting on what I believe I'm voting on. It sounds to me as if I can, if maybe I should just use myself.
Maybe the way I look at it is if I'm in the water department and I have a brother that wants to come to work
Yes.
in the same department, he can't
Gotcha.
Currently.
currently.
And he couldn't if he was gonna work for me, or for Bill.
Yeah.
And that's what I say with vertical.
Yeah, if I'm the
org
supervisor,
chart,
you
I can't go along with that. That's totally problems. But if someone has a relative that can do the job, is qualified to do the job, and that person's gonna work within my department, I have no problem with that. But it's the mother, daughter, one is the supervisor, that's where I have the issue, or the father, the son, the brother, and the brother. That's where I have an issue.
If you're a supervisor.
Yeah,
Because
you're
my brother couldn't come to work for me if I'm a supervisor.
Yeah.
But if we're just two guys, you and I, we're brothers, we can both work in the same department as far as this is concerned.
Which we're not.
We're not,
You work
yeah,
in
we'll make that clear.
different departments in the city currently,
Yes,
Yes.
but not the same department
correct. That's the way it is right now.
currently.
And it had always been that way prior to our last city manager. Last city manager changed that shit like that.
And yet the same department is the one that's likely. My dad's a cop, I wanna be a cop. My dad's a fireman, I wanna be a fireman. My dad works in the electric department, you know, I've learned that. It's a book I read in praise of nepotism. It really talks about, you know, how men used to teach children, you know, their trade, and, you know, all of that has left us. And then one of the reasons it's left us is that we have prohibited in the workplace. I mean, you know, and it's not just in public work, it's in private work. We don't want relatives because we see that there's some issue there. And of course there can be. If you're the owner of the Chevy dealership and your son works there, and he of course is the general manager, and he's lazy, you know, I mean, it's gonna cause mass problem in that area. In the past, we've had father-son, superintendent-son, superintendent-son in the departments. And I don't know, you know, I suppose it probably did cause some issues, but it was the supervisor nature of it. What do you think, Dixie? You're the one that asked me to do this. You're kind of HR person.
Dakota wants a job?
Well, I agree with this in this circumstance. When we did have the issues before, it was with the supervisor situation. But in the particular situation we're talking about, it would even be different shifts. So it wouldn't even be on at the same time. I mean, but it doesn't say specifically that in here, that would have to be on different shifts, so.
That doesn't mean it couldn't happen.
Right. I think in this instance, because sometimes takes time to train new people, and sometimes it takes a lot of time, and they have to pass tests and go through a lot of specifics, and it costs us money. We're paying them all that time, we're paying for their training. And if you get somebody that's trained, that's ready to go to work, and the only reason you can't hire them is because they have a relative here, that's difficult, because we don't often get those people here. And they probably do in bigger towns, but in Berry, we don't often get those. I'm already trained and I want to work there. And it's a shame for us to have to pass that up whenever we can see it being of value to us.
And it probably happens so that we train somebody and then they realize that they don't really like that job, so then they leave. You know, this
Or
is someone
we
that
train
knows the job.
Or a training ground, and then they go to bigger towns. They go to Stillwater or Ponca or Enid. And in this case, I don't think we would be facing that either.
I move to approve the amendment as discussed.
Second.
Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Kolar,
Yes.
Vaughn,
Yes.
Gilbeck,
Yes.
Ahern,
No.
Marshall,
Yes.
White,
Yes.
Stroller.
Yes. Thank you, council. Item number 12. Consider approval of plans and specifications and advertisement for a bid for the actuator and valve replacement project at the Perry Water Treatment plant. Okay, this is the project that, those of you that were at the planning session, that Vernon come in and told us the seriousness of the water plant and the valves, actuators that were going bad, and so what to bid for this project. Any discussion?
That is some dense reading. You do that for a living, right?
Yes, I do that, and what I did is I sent it out to the Cowan group to check, and they checked and made a few corrections. We made those corrections. One of the corrections is that we're gonna get unit price bids and lump sum bids, but I've spoken to Russ about this, and we really feel that we probably need to do the whole project. We're hopeful that if the council feels that this is an important issue, that perhaps we can request a partial or a total grant for this. It kind of coincides with the with the next grant cycle. But if not, we're kind of convinced about the importance of this, and if it's not done all at once, the extra mobilization would be $25,000 to $50,000 extra dollars. So, I don't have an estimate yet. Maybe 300,000, but we're gonna have to see what comes back, to get an estimate. So these have been checked by an engineer, and I think we're ready to go. Let me see, bid date's April 8th, and we do have a mandatory a pre-bid conference set on the 20th.
March something, it's end of
Yeah,
March,
March
25th or
20th,
something, I don't remember what it was.
something. We'll take a look at that.
It will provide us with the option to split it if we thought we needed to.
Yes, because there are unit prices. There are unit prices given.
But one thing you probably need to know is to split it, other than money, one of the big recommendations not to split it is because a lot more training, because if you had some of them being air valve activated and some of them electric, they open at different speeds and open and close differently, and they said it would take a lot more training and there was a lot more room for operator error, and that was a big concern of the Cowan group, and when we were putting this together, that they strongly recommended it be done all at once because of the operator error issue.
And I believe we're gonna get close to $400,000 by this time it's all said and done.
Okay.
Do we have a
Motion approved.
motion to approve? Do you have a second? No?
Second?
Second. Thank you. Roll call, please.
Kolar,
Yes.
Vaughn,
Yes.
Gilbeck,
Yes.
Ahern,
Yes.
Marshall,
Yes.
White,
Yes.
Stroller.
Yes. Thank you, council. Item 13, consider approval of ordinance number 2020-04 for the city council of the city of Perry, Oklahoma, amending chapter 17 of the Perry Municipal Code 2018 supplement entitled Utilities by the amendment of section 17-209 by adding a new subsection 18, adding failure to pay sales and/or hotel tax as a reason to terminate utility services, providing for repealer savings, codification, severability, and declaring an emergency. Bryce, would you like to talk
Yeah,
about this?
there are lots of reasons why we can turn off your utility services, other than not paying your bill. And, you know, if you got a problem at your house that may be cause a fire, a defect, or may cause an injury to our system, or you fail to put up an appropriate bond, or you sneak in with someone else, you know, you've left the city $1,000 bill, so now you get your girlfriend to go in and to apply for a utility service, but it's really gonna be your house. You're misrepresenting your identity. And we find out about that. We send a notice out to the house and say, look, is this true? And give them an opportunity to come in and we discuss the situation. So there's like 15 different reasons. Well, let me see. I can tell you exactly how many there are. Let me see. We'll go to item 13. It's whatever this number is. Yeah, it's number 18. So there's 18 reasons if you pass this. This is, you know, if you're in business, you need to be paying all lawfully enacted sales and hotel taxes and other taxes due the city. If not, we're supplying you electricity and you're open for business and you're failing to pay taxes. I mean, the Oklahoma Tax Commission isn't as kind. They come in if they find out and they just lock you up. They put a chain on your front door. What we would do is we'd send a notice out and say, you know, we haven't gotten hotel taxes remitted in, you know, how many months would it be before we
Usually the
recognize?
third month is
About
when
the
we.
third month. And we would say that. So this is just another reason why we could terminate services for failure to pay those local sales tax or hotel tax. I have done it. We have passed this ordinance in 2 of my other communities. One of my communities is a tourist destination. Okay, and they had a county commissioner who lost and then wouldn't pay his taxes. And so they passed this. And in another one, they passed it too. I won't say why, because it had to do with someone in government. But that's what's recommended, and I put that together for your consideration.
So, my concern off the bat is, and I'm gonna use the hotel as an example, just that it's in here. Hotel taxes is that you shut off the utilities and they can't even accrue any more tax that they should be, because they can't take guests at that point. Or you run the chance of that hotel not being able to stay in business to continue doing the business that they're doing. And I do understand we want a way to get the money, the sales tax, or the tax money, but, Bryce, can I ask you to tell the council, we kind of had a quick chat. We were talking about something else, but you kind of have another option as well to be able to get that tax money?
Yeah, it's an additional option. It's something that the state put in the code here a few years ago. And, you know, the state right now collects the sales tax for us. They collect the state sales tax. If the state sales tax is up, then all they do is look how much local tax is, and they collect that. And for that we pay a small fee for them to remit that. Well, this is actually the only instance in which cities pay or collect taxes. You know, other than that, I mean, we don't physically collect taxes. If the state collects taxes, and if we had a GO bond, the county would collect the tax. And so the statute was amended to permit the state to collect the hotel tax. So you would enter into a contract with the state; they would collect the hotel tax, and the cost of that is 0.5%. So we did find out what the cost of that would be. No, I think one of the issues is, and I don't know that I know, that I actually know the answer, and that's, well, what if there was an enforcement proceeding? What do they do? Well, we know what they can't do. They can't turn off the electricity. We're the utility person. But, you know, they can go lock the doors. I've seen it happen in some of my communities when they haven't paid taxes, or when they've entered into a payment agreement and they haven't lived up to their payment agreement. They just come and shut down the doors of the restaurant.
That's sales tax though, right?
That's sales tax.
Okay.
I
So
don't know if that works.
If this tax is our tax though, so why would the state care? I mean,
The state,
they're getting their tax, so.
well, the state would be our agent in collecting this tax. And I
They
mean,
would care because they're getting a bit of a cut.
well, they're getting a bit of a cut, and they're collecting it with the state and local tax. So,
Well,
you
let
know,
me just step in right there. They aren't getting it. I mean, in this situation is germane to one institution within the city limits. And right now, the state is not getting their sales tax portion either. So not only are they not getting their money, we're not getting our money. I think with the state collecting our hotel tax, super beneficial when you have a lot of hotels, motels, inns, those kinds of things where it's hard to keep track of who's paid and who hasn't paid and all of that. In our situation, we have a pretty small population. We know who pays and who doesn't pay. We know if they're gonna pay a little late or kind of what their trends are. This isn't about collecting the money or knowing where the money is. This is about enforcing the tax itself. We need an enforcement mechanism to get that money. Right now, the Oklahoma Tax Commission doesn't provide that. So, and while I see that that's a great benefit in the situations that Bryce has had previously, I don't see that being a good solution here. It costs us more money. It delays our ability to get the money, because that will be another 30-day time frame lag. And it doesn't solve the problem of enforcement.
Well, if they come in, I mean, typically, I'm just gonna guess, people that aren't paying the hotel tax aren't paying the sales tax too. It's kind of a,
You're exactly right.
yeah, it's kind of a common theme there. So if the state comes in and puts the chain on the door, doesn't matter if they got utilities or not, they're not gonna be open to business, they're not gonna be able to raise any more money, they just gotta pay taxes. So why would we pay the state extra money to come do what we need to do, which is cut them off? I mean,
They collect that tax. It's not that difficult to just remit it to where it needs to be,
yeah,
you know, but
yeah,
they choose not to.
absolutely.
I mean,
Yeah,
you know, it's
yeah, I
like.
mean,
And it usually
it's like-
goes
it's
quite a
like-
while before that chain comes on.
Yeah, let's say $100, but I mean, it's probably more than that, but you collect $100, you know that,
8% of it.
is it 8%? Okay, so $8 goes somewhere else, you know?
Well, what happens is, as you probably can guess, is if you don't remit 1 month,
Yeah, then you're behind.
and then eventually you get the door, I mean, how many places have you seen where you had a chain on a door of a business and they reopened? Not very often, because they built themselves such a hole. So I don't think personally that the state collecting our hotel tax is gonna,
And normally the state lets that go 5, 6, 7 months before they
yeah.
ever,
Oh, yeah.
and then, so we're not gonna get it within a month or so. And chances are we may not ever get it.
I realize that some of these details are probably protected and you can't say much, you know, in front of everybody, but like, is this just a flat out refusal, or are they just late? Or are they saying they're behind, or?
It is a consistent issue. We've done, the most recent situation goes back to, can I say this?
well, we shouldn't speak to the name.
yeah.
I would say.
So
Yeah,
we
I
have a
don't- I'm not
process,
asking for
we
that.
have a process whereby we make phone calls, we send letters, and then in this, what brought this up is, it has gone a number of months where we've had no response to phone calls, letters, physical visits, or actually went to the premises, knocked on the door, hello, 2 different times. with no response.
So my question to that is, would it be better as a council to take care of this on the individual basis instead of trying to enforce this to everybody else?
That's what this is. We're not gonna shut off everybody in town.
Well, I know, but we're applying this to everybody else when really we're just worried about one person, right?
Well, the other hotels could do it too, or whoever.
Well, they could, but if they don't.
Well, then they won't get the utility shut off.
Yeah, it's normally the one that makes the rule for the many. I mean, if that's what you're saying, that's often the way it works.
Warnings on things that.
Now, and it's, you know, as a government, what we do is we look for a way to enforce, you know, to enforce payment. I mean, that's the purpose of this, of this section, if you choose to approve it.
I think what we need to think about is how long do we want to go without getting our payment? Because eventually the state's gonna close their doors anyway. Do we just wanna follow along with however long the Oklahoma Tax Commission waits to close their doors? Or do we wanna say, okay, after 3 months and you haven't paid, we're gonna turn off your electricity? Because the state's gonna do it eventually.
I would think we want sooner rather than later.
Yeah, I'd rather try to get it before the state does.
Because we're just dumping money into them.
Because if the state closes them, 9 times out of 10, they're not ever gonna get our money.
Let me pose another question along those lines. Because I have no clue and I don't want the details that you can't say. But would it be possible though that them paying their utility bills is actually more income for us than the tax money that we would get?
That could be the case at
And
times.
that us cutting off those utilities would actually be less money the city would receive over that period of time.
It usually goes hand in hand.
Well, it all depends on what the profit margin is in your utilities.
That they, it's not, they'll do enough.
Well, it's probably true, but in the end, they're gonna leave us a bill. And that bill is gonna be,
It becomes a
when
shell
thrown against profit, it will throw against months and months and months of profit, cause it will be the whole bill. It will be at least 45 or 60 days, right?
Which the deposit isn't sufficient, you know.
Yeah, and the deposits, none of them are really sufficient.
It sounds very similar to what we've talked about with residential. How long are you gonna allow a residential customer to go without paying their bill? How long do we let them go?
And
And then the deposit is not enough to cover it if they leave town. Who's to say that a local business person who's not paying their taxes can't just leave town? I mean, somebody who's not paying their taxes has something going on. I mean, Bill, you can make it simple and collect $100, you better put 8 of it away. You know, I mean, it is simple, but it also, there's a lot, when things are going on in people's lives and things like that, they kind of put things to the side. And I'm all in favor of, you know, keeping people in business, but there's not a single person at this table who couldn't pay their utility bill for 3 months, and you would have it cut off if you didn't pay it for 3 months.
Well, Derek brought up a good point about which would be better, the utilities or but the utilities, let's say there's $500 utility bill. I mean, we've got $300 or $400 worth of expenses in that. Or your taxes, I mean, that goes towards things, but we don't have any expenses in the tax. So we get $500 worth of cash here to do something with, but if we're $500 worth of utilities, we may only make $100 on that. So,
The margin, as you said.
yeah, it depends on what your profit margin is, you know?
That was kind of the question.
Yeah.
And if we do approve this, we need to put a time on it, or is that gonna be on
That's
a
part-
case-by-case basis?
That's provided in other provisions of the code, when the bill is due. You know, in this case, well, no, let me take that back.
Hotel.
No, this is hotel, well, it's sales tax or hotel. We could, in this section, we could put more than 60 days, you know, or more than 30 days or something. I provided a little, some, administrative discretion there. You could decide to tighten it up. Fails to remit monthly, I have monthly, the full amount, so that's every month you need to remit it. If you want to do something other than that, you would put it right there. Fails to remit for,
60 days or?
for, 2 consecutive months or.
How far out are they running now? Are they 90 days or they were?
September was their last submission.
Wow.
How many more of these instances do we see where they get behind that we noticed that first time?
And they
then
respond to a letter.
And they
then-
respond and get back.
Yep, and there's probably, that happens occasionally. So, I would say at least give them a 30-day leeway. And because usually if we send the letter, they will respond to it. Just a reminder, hey, haven't received it. So I would think, if you're asking my opinion, a 60-day, then we can bring out the big guns. If you haven't responded to our first letter, our phone call, and a second letter, then hi, something's gonna happen.
And maybe the prospect of having their electricity cut off will get them to, oh yeah, they mean business.
Respond in the first place, yeah. Before it gets that far out.
Would help me a lot, hearing the answer for Derek's question on how many other places do this and how long it usually takes.
So if we pass this, Meredith, what's the next step with that specific place? Is it 60 days from tonight?
Actually, there was contact made today, and payment is forthcoming.
For the entire 6 months?
So, what we did, because we do not have their sales tax reports, because they have not submitted to the state, we did an estimate. And we provided them with an estimate of what we expected those previous months to cost, and that's what we're expecting.
So payment in full, based on your estimates at that time?
Yes.
That's not just the hotel tax.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, not the sales tax. just
No,
the hotel
no, we
tax.
can't.
Yeah, we can't do that because of.
But I will say, based upon my last review at the Oklahoma Tax Commission, that hasn't been submitted either.
So that may be a whole lot worse problem than they got here.
So I placed that language in there in 2 spots for 2 consecutive months, in the appropriate spots, dealing with the hotel tax or filing the report for 2 consecutive months. If you like that amendment.
I'll make a motion to approve ordinance number 2020-04 with those 2 amendments that Bryce just presented with the 2 consecutive months.
Second.
Any further discussion? Roll call.
Fuller,
Yes.
Vaughn,
Yes.
Gilbeck,
Yes.
Ahern,
Yes.
Marshall,
Yes.
White,
Yes.
Straw.
Yes. Motion on an emergency, please.
So moved. Second.
Roll call.
Fuller,
Yes.
Vaughn,
Yes.
Gilbeck,
Yes.
Ahern,
Yes.
Marshall,
Yes.
White,
Yes.
Straw.
Yes, thank you, council. Item 14, continued discussion on code enforcement, especially issues concerning junk motor vehicles and open storage and direct action as may be appropriate. We started this discussion in our planning session and really didn't, we had discussion but really didn't get to how we wanted to handle this. It deals with junk motor vehicles. I'm gonna let Brian, if you'd like to come and lead this discussion. But I know there's abandoned vehicles, dismantled vehicles, won't run vehicles, not tagged vehicles. And then there's all that same stuff behind a fence, or in your backyard, correct?
Correct.
So go ahead, sir.
Well, let me just start by saying it's a good-looking council, so take it easy on me. Okay, so the two things that we thought could really use some addressing were the things that I think the term being covered with a Band-Aid kind of came up. Seems to me that that's what was offered in the appropriate screen portion of this, because basically what we're promoting there is that it's okay if you have a mess, as long as you can hide it from the city. And so in a project that Larry has had us working on, we've been going out and assigning sort of an overall grade that, we're going to present this to you guys and see kind of where the lay of the land is. But in finding that, one of the dominant things that kept coming across my desk was junk motor vehicles hidden in backyards by fences that, number one, don't meet anything in here, but it was overwhelming how much we were finding. And then open storage, as it was coming across my desk, I'm finding just where it says front side yards. So, okay, that's all we can work. But even that in the side yards, it's as pertains to if you can put a fence around it, you're good to go. I wish I brought this with me. I did have examples that I presented to Bryce to show to him, but there's always that one guy, and I'll leave it out of there, but literally took just enough fence and put it around the car in the middle of the backyard. Sorry, I talk with my hands a lot, but so it was kind of one of those, okay, where do we want to go with this? What do we want to do with this? Do we want to promote, it's good as long as you can hide it, or do we want to get rid of the problem entirely? And so that's kind of why I presented this, and now why I'm up here sweating profusely, talking to you.
So when you talk about open storage, what kind of things are you talking about?
So, okay, open storage is basically everything up to the line of trash and debris. So we're talking like appliances, furniture that's intended for indoor. When I say appliances, there's a separate ordinance for that, but use, kind of microwaves, the small little run-of-the-mill type stuff. Stuff that I wouldn't quite go as far as to say, hey, you need to trash that, or you need to bag that up and get rid of it. But things that people, like you've drove around and seen people with things under their carport. So that typically all is going to be classified as open storage. Is that making, okay, clear as mud? Good deal.
Is there a difference between residential and commercial?
The way that this was written.
We don't have commercial addressed. That's one of the issues, whether open storage should include commercial too. So the three issues are: one, open storage right now applies to the residences. It applies, you can't put it in the front yard. And but you can put it in the side yard if it's appropriately screened. And we don't deal with backyards. On junk motor vehicles.
Now, Bryce, let me ask you, backyards, if they're hidden by the fence, is that correct, or just any backyard?
No, if it's in a backyard, you can't touch it,
You
period.
can't touch.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, we don't have a rule for backyards, whether it's just side yards appropriately fenced. It's really thinking about the street, And then junk motor vehicles, if you can put it in a building, that's okay, and we're still saying that's okay.
Right.
But the rule is if you go behind an opaque fence, you can store 7 in your backyard, behind a fence in a residential community. And of course, the harm here is when you're storing junk and you're storing cars, and they don't move and they don't run, they become a haven for rats and vermin, and grass grows up around them, and it just becomes a mess. And this is aesthetics, but it's a bit of fire safety, and it's a bit of health, safety, welfare. And we eased into this when we did it. We eased into it. Now the third issue is whether you want to do anything about commercial businesses, because there's commercial businesses that just have stuff all over their yards. Just stack it high, and grass is growing up you know, through some of that. And I haven't been through the street that's the east-west street that's just north of Delaware. But that was always a choice one. In looking at a downtown, that street has always surprised me with kind of the condition, you know, that it's in. Not to, I don't even know what businesses are there. But there's other areas where we could do that. So, I mean, if you don't want to tackle one, don't tackle commercial, okay? You know, the main one where we could do a massive cleanup effort in this community is if we made open storage apply. You know, you just can't put junk in and around your place, in the front yard, the side yard, or the backyard. And, you know, with the refrigerators and washing machines and couches that, you know, you got sick of in the house, so you threw it outside and it rains on it, and broken planters and all of it. You know, if we could start there, that would be a nice place to start. And really, what we're talking about is, you know, we're spending a bunch of money in code enforcement, a bunch of personnel costs, and I think that Larry's position is that we need to clean up the city. And I think there's lots of folks that believe that a cleaned up city makes a real difference in a lot of things, and including people want to come there and people want to live there and the like. So, and you don't have to do anything today. All you have to do is tell us, bring it to us and let us look and see what they look like, you know. And if you said that, then we could bring you something at the next meeting, you know, in each one of these instances and what they look like. But I would say that Larry and Brian and Jesse and Jerry and everyone is probably in favor of making some of these changes if the council agrees. That they would like to get a little bit, to be able to put a little teeth into the work. Now, the other thing I do, if you did it, this isn't one that we would pass with an emergency. I think because we had it one way for a long time, you know, that we ought to, if you decided to do it, we need to give the public some time. Let's say it's moving cars. I think cars is 6 months, you know. With respect to the junk, probably 3 months, and we would set a date out there, and we would do our best to put articles in the newspaper and on Facebook and in the messenger and the like, telling them that these rules are, you know, these rules are coming, and even sending out letters and saying that these rules are coming. So, but you don't have to make a decision tonight. But if you would like to see something, we could sure bring that to you.
So I have a couple.
Yeah.
Firstly, wouldn't you say, and I think you're kind of saying that, but the commercial would, if we wanted to tackle that, it would be a separate ordinance or a portion of the ordinance directly for commercial.
Yeah, I don't think it fits necessarily into
I think
this.
we need a residential and a commercial.
Yeah,
Because
and
they're two different.
I would agree, and I'd like to put off commercial. I would actually like to see how much we could tackle this in the residences. I mean, you could certainly do it, but if you would be willing to do some of this, let's see what the impact would be first.
The other thing to keep in mind that I think would be helpful is if we coincide any of those changes to fit around the citywide cleanup, so that they do have an option, another outlet there. But the other thing.
When is that? April?
We don't have a date scheduled yet, but I just talked to Noelle last week and got her date for Springfest, and then we usually try to schedule it right before that.
Say April.
So, yeah, it'd be toward the end of April, mid-April.
Go ahead, Jerry.
I was just, the other thing I'd like to ask, at least for my benefit, if you could send maybe a list of some of the places that you've had reported, and so I can drive around and,
Yeah,
and look
absolutely.
and then, you said you had that kind of work you've been doing
Yeah.
and documented, that'd be nice to see those things and.
Yeah, absolutely. I can provide that.
I would like to say that Brian and Jesse's approach has been baby steps, even though they have the authority within ordinance or codes to maybe press it a little bit. They've gone baby steps, and I appreciate that for both of those guys.
If I can for just a moment, just because I think it helps in any one of these if you can put flesh on the story. And so, many of you know I'm not from here. I transferred over from another municipality, and one of the things that was a big push was that they were trying to get businesses on the east side of town. That was a heavily neglected part of town, in which case it was, the mentality was, well, that's where we'll let everybody that kind of can't uphold to the west side and to the south and north side of town, we'll let them go over there. What happened in that process was we had several businesses actually that came through that we were getting calls asking about certain buildings, and they would tell us who they were from, never hear from them again. So we start following up, trying to figure out what this is. Well, it turns out that the most common way to go into that particular town is right on this highway out here, and typically you go in the east side of town. People were coming in, they were seeing that particular side of town that was heavily neglected, they were turning right back around and saying, this town doesn't have any money, we're not gonna set up shop here. A couple of them, we asked them to come up 81, oops, I just gave that away, but anyways, they did come up, and I'll put it this way, now that town has a Popeye's chicken, and a couple other restaurants that happen to open up from that, and now if you go in that other way, you start to see that that town, or that side's getting cleaned up because, oops, maybe we shouldn't have done that. So it's just maybe something to think about in this whole process.
Okay, question I have. We were talking about open storage in the backyard, you can't touch it. But then Bryce said you can store a car in the backyard if you have opaque fence. So we can store junk in the backyard and no fence. But if you store a car, you have to have a fence.
Correct.
That's messed up.
Well, so, and this is the way that it talks about it again later in the ordinance, and the way that it describes basically is you can have junk even in your side yard, but you gotta have a fence. In your backyard, you can just set it there, and I just gotta drive by and wave at you.
But if you have a car in your backyard?
Yeah, you have to put a fence around it. But it doesn't necessarily say just in your rear yard. You can put a junker right out in your front yard, and I probably shouldn't have said this on camera, and put a fence right around it. In the way that this ordinance
So my
is.
point is, why are we saying if you have a junk car in your backyard, you have to put a fence around it, but if you just have junk back there, we don't care? Junk's junk to me, okay?
Correct.
You understand what I'm saying?
Yep. Well, that's why.
No, I know
Yeah.
what you're saying.
Yeah.
But it just doesn't make any sense to me, you know? We can pile stuff up as tall as our house in the backyard,
Correct.
and we don't have to hide it.
Correct.
But let me put one junk vehicle back there and I gotta build a fence.
Correct. Well, and I believe, and Bryce, correct
What
me
if
if
you
I'm-
cover it up with junk?
Some of the fences, you can probably classify as.
Yeah, that's your fence.
Bryce, correct me if I'm wrong though, a lot of this, when it was originally brought in, was adopted from the Oklahoma State, and that's how they had it written up, I believe. Isn't that correct?
You know, I think these, on junk motor vehicles, I think junk motor vehicles originally had come from Enid. But it came from Enid when I left Enid in 1995.
Right.
You know? So you guys have, you know, closed that hole since then. The other one I just wrote.
Okay.
You know, and that's the open storage. I did that from scratch, and that's in a whole lot of communities, and that I represent. And you know, you really have to want to clean up your town to do more. But saying that you shouldn't have junk around your house, you know, is probably a good idea. Of course, it's, you know, beauty is in the eye of the beholder, and that's why you have to define, you know, what you're talking about. There will be the person out there that has 7 grills, right? and all of them will be rusted out. Well, probably junk,
Correct.
you know? I mean, just because it could be out there if it was working, but I mean, if it's falling down on one leg and, you know, and there's grass growing up through it and all of that. But mostly, I mean, what are you seeing out there? You're seeing everything, right?
One of the large address things, yes, a lot, a mixture of everything. It's a fruit cocktail of junk. But a lot of the things that we're running on, or running into, are people that are loading down trailers, leaving them for an extended period of time. So rain, weather, everything has time to just ruin whatever is on there. So it may have started with the best of intentions of, well, we're going to haul this off, to where it develops itself down into junk. But the way that this is classified is open storage is limited to junk and debris filled trailers. So while I can't necessarily call it trash at that point, I can call it open storage, saying you need to clean off this trailer and get rid of the trash and debris.
Right.
Well, I have to be careful with my wording.
What about tree limbs, like big piles of tree limbs and stuff? How does that fall into junk?
That's trash. It's different.
Debris.
Right. Yeah, when I say open storage, it's things that, like, we're not gonna send somebody out
No,
to
I
remove.
understand, I just
Yeah,
wanna know
okay.
how, where piles of tree limbs fell into your.
Yeah, no,
description.
that's trash. You call Davis on that one.
You know, I was sitting here thinking about, junk cars in the city of Perry. I mean, it doesn't seem like we have to drive very far to find a car here or there. And it may be the people don't have the money to haul them off. And I wonder if the city would be interested in, we have several businesses here in town that have wrecker services. If like on a cleanup day, even if we had to pay $10 a car, so I mean, get the wrecker service to buy in and say, hey, if you want me to help you, I'll go haul people's cars for $10 or something, you know, or $20 or.
If the vehicle owner calls them, it is completely free. It doesn't cost anybody anything. But they have to prove that they own the vehicle, so they have to have the title. And in some places, actually, they even pay you to come pick up the vehicle and take it across the scales. I think Stanley's does do that. I don't know about Big Jim's.
They do what now?
They will come pick up the vehicle. If you have the title, you sign it over to them, they will pay you for the weight of the car, and they drag it across the scales. I think they actually make a little bit of a profit, but it's of no cost to them.
But some other people, they'll just come get it for free. Like Big Jim, he'll just come pick your car up for free.
I don't know if Big Jim will. I know Stanley's does.
Okay.
Well, there's organizations that'll do that too. American Heart Association, places like that, NPR, they'll come pick those cars up for, as long as you have the proper legal documents to prove that that is your vehicle.
Cool.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, if we can identify something as a junked vehicle, we have a towing procedure in place that we will ultimately come, if we have access to it, and we can come, or we'll remove it, and we'll have Stanley's take it out there, and I mean, nobody ever sees a bill for that unless you wanna go reclaim the vehicle. So it's kind of that same process.
And that may be something the city can help with, is coming up with maybe a little resource section to say, you know, here's some people you can contact to help you get rid of this vehicle.
Or they could call us.
Sure.
And say, no, I'm serious, they could call us and say, they don't know who to call. They could call the city and say, I got this junk car on cleanup day. And we could contact Stanley and say, hey, here's a list of 5 cars that these people have called in and want picked up, you know?
Yeah.
And I guess we could tell them, hey, you gotta have a title. Mr. Payne seems to have a problem with Twitch.
Well, the vehicles you're addressing are assumed to be of no value and junk, and they'd like to have them gone. But I'm thinking there's probably as many of them out there that would say, well, that was Grandpa's truck, and I'm gonna fix it up someday. Have you run into situations like that, where they, in their mind, they've got plans for it, they're going to fix it one of these days?
Absolutely. That's where the option for storing it completely inside of a building to where you can go and have your hobby, but it doesn't affect anyone else around you. That's where
Or in your backyard for the privacy fence.
As it currently stands, yes.
Okay.
Well, if the question is to we want Bryce to bring something back, I would say personally, yes, I think
Yeah.
he should bring something back that we can look at, talk about, decide whether it's the right direction.
What would probably be eliminating the appropriate screen for junk motor vehicles with a 6 months amortization clause. That's probably what it would be. And then on residential property, we'll probably look at definition of what's open storage. I'd like to look at that definition again. And then provide that applies to the front, side, and backyard.
From street, yeah, I'm
And
sorry.
and
go ahead.
probably all sides, but probably put a requirement in there that, which we don't have, require that a letter be sent and notice be given and an opportunity to meet with a hearing officer, code officer, to discuss it prior to the time of any charges. Because do understand that both of these become, or can become, cases in the municipal court. I mean, open storage is let's say criminal case, it's a code case, but it's in the, the criminal court not a record, the Perry criminal court not a record. And so that's probably what it would look like, but we'll think about it. And then I would reserve commercial for another day. I would actually like to see how, if you pass these, how this works for a period of time, and if it does actually help, what the problem is. I also think we ought to bring a list
Okay.
of places, and probably provide that before the next meeting to the council. Larry can send that out, and if people want to drive by.
I'd like to have time
Yeah.
to do that, and I'd also kind of like to hear your recommendation. You're asking for our recommendation, but I wouldn't mind hearing your recommendation as well, but whether that's tonight or
As far as,
what your thoughts are on what you'd like to see done there.
personally, I mean, I gotta wait on that one. I would prefer to see, like I said at the beginning, the Band-Aid method, and that's just a term that I've adopted, done away with, which would be the appropriate screen. If you've got something of value, I'm not gonna harass you about that, I mean, everybody's got stuff that, whatever, but in some sense, it would promote people actually buying storage buildings and putting stuff where it needs to be, or plainly put it inside. But even, with junk motor vehicles, everything that Bryce described, and then over time, I mean, if you go with the motto, or the example that, David gave, vehicles are gonna rust out, stuff's gonna spew on the ground, it's gonna be gross, you get into, it can go pretty gnarly, to a point of where it's like, well, now how do we get this thing out of here, sort of getting it back on, just flipping it over, So my suggestion would be doing away with the hiding it, and just promoting like a simple, you've got to get it cleaned up.
We're trying to beautify our town to a certain degree, and, I was sitting here thinking, eliminate everything from street view, but that's not fair. I mean, because if you live in the middle of a block, you have a different ordinance than the guy that lives on the corner, because you can drive down the side street and see in his backyard. So I think it has to be all back, if we're gonna try to make the street view better, it's gotta pertain to everybody's backyard.
I got another question, and I don't know if we've thought about this or not, but some of these properties that are considered to be inside city limits are still close to the outskirts and considered agricultural. So the people that have bought those properties bought that with that in mind, that, hey, I can actually treat this like I do the farm, and I don't have to really worry about it. What do we do about those people?
Residential and agricultural have two different ordinances, wouldn't it, Bryce?
Well, you're correct with respect to weeds and, weeds, high weeds, we can't enforce that on agricultural property.
And I'm sure they'll have old vehicles and implements and stuff like that sitting around because it is agricultural.
Now,
Right.
Bryce, doesn't it also say that if it is agricultural, you have to have some kind of agricultural endeavor there?
Well, yeah, I mean, yeah.
I mean, you have to have a goat, you have to have a cow, horse, something like that. You just say, it's zoned agricultural, so you can't touch me. I don't believe that's correct, but.
Well, I know that the agriculture exception goes to weeds.
Correct.
I mean, that's what it goes to. I don't know, in our code, it doesn't go to any of these other issues.
No.
But it can, you know, because you're the lawmakers. You know, if that's what you want, we can provide the same kind of language that there is in the weed ordinance. And of course, that's based on the weed statute, which provides for that. And that provides that you can enforce them, and I don't know the exact language. Whether it may be used as agriculture, for agricultural purposes.
So what we ran into in that other municipality was we didn't enforce anything that was ag or if it was over an acre on a residential lot because people would bail that and use that for an agricultural purpose. However, it was very specified in your agricultural zoning as to what those uses could be, and basically it was supporting an ag, so you know, drilling, excavating, farming, you know, I mean, it ran down the list of the uses that you could use, but a lot of what you find here is people came to well, I'm just gonna stick it at the farm, and that's what they view agricultural as, versus where an agricultural zoning was never intended, to my understanding, to house nuisances. It wasn't just somewhere you could relocate the problem. It had to support an agricultural use.
Right. And if you want that, we could show you that type of language in each one of these. Because that's a good point. I mean, that there's a state law provision on weeds on that issue, and we probably ought to, balance this.
I know we have a residential area that the developer thinks is a farming operation. And he comes in and bails it a couple times a year, and we need to enforce that problem.
I'll add it to my list. So my question though, about how extensive of a list do you want? Like every property, worst of the worst?
I would like several instances of what we're discussing here, and then some numbers if possible.
Okay.
As opposed to everyone probably, but is that fair enough to everyone else?
I would like to see kind of the worst of the worst, and maybe here's a marginal case that could go either way, and just kind of know how you would handle that kind of
Maybe
thing.
like 10 or so, and then
And then what a total
and then the
number
numbers.
that there are.
Okay.
Any more discussion? Any more questions?
Council, we appreciate your guidance, really do, thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Randy.
sir.
Appreciate it.
Item 15, consider approval of an invoice from CEC Corporation in the amount of $12,480 for engineering services provided on the rehabilitated fuel system airport drainage project. This is the engineering of the stuff we've been talking about out at the airport.
Motion approved.
Second.
Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Goldar.
Yes.
Vaughn.
Yes.
Gilberto.
Yes.
Ahern.
Yes.
Marshall. Yes. White.
Yes.
Stroller.
Yes. Item 16, any new business that needs to be discussed this evening? Seeing none, item 17.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Goldar.
Yes.
Vaughn.
Yes.
Gilberto.
Yes.
Ahern.
Yes.
Marshall.
Yes.
White.
Yes.
Stroller.
Yes. Thank you, council.